Where do the tiers fall at the running back position? Next on the Football Guys College Football Show.
We're excited to get you running back tiers. This is one of those fun ones. We did quarterback tiers in the last episode. We're going to be diving into running back tiers. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe button, leave a comment. Let us know in terms of running backs. The running back landscape is a mess right now, so it's fun to kind of go through your rankings and kind of readjust what you're thinking about. We already had Jeff Bell yelling at us for the last 20 minutes pre-show, so this should be a fun one. Before we get into the show, make sure you download the rookie guide. You can find it at Football Guys. If you have those dynasty drafts still coming, I know there's some guys out there that don't draft till the summer, so go get your rookie guide from Football Guys. But let's dive into our tiers. Let's get into our running backs. Tier 1, we got one guy, Bijan Robinson, Atlanta Falcons running back. And hey, we better let just Jeff take this one because he just wrote like a 4,000-word spotlight for Bijan Robinson. What do we have on Bijan here? Should he be in tier 1 by himself? Is he the running back 1, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, when you add in age, health relative to other running backs that are his relative age, I think value within the offensive scheme, I think he's the clear running back 1. When you really look at values around the dynasty community, he's that only guy that is really kind of inching up into the first round in Superflex drafts. It's kind of, when you look at positions, it's kind of him with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson towards the top of positions outside of quarterback that can potentially go in round 1. So that clears the tier. And I think that is an important way to, if you're doing tiers, kind of look at those startup values and see where guys are going in startups. And that's where he solidifies himself relative to the other backs. And so, yeah, you mentioned that spotlight. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Make sure to check that out on the website. But I really talked about how Arthur Smith, for all the heat he gets, he is pretty creative offensively. And so there is a great opportunity for a very creative role for Bijan Robinson. See value in the passing game, to see rushing upside, to get that volume in the rushing game. And so just really touching all aspects of football and being that chess piece for what should be a very creative scheme.
Yeah, I think you said it best. And you said it best in that article where you talk about total football and kind of, using Bijan in different ways. I think Bijan's probably the starting slot receiver as well as the starting running back, and the way that they can get creative with that. Like you mentioned, Arthur Smith is such a wizard. I think there's a real chance that Bijan has over 320 opportunities this first year, because we do know that Arthur Smith likes to turn around and hand the ball off a lot. And the last time he had a back as good as Bijan was Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry, I believe, had a 2,000-yard season with him. So the last time that Arthur Smith called those games for him. So I think you're looking at early production. You're looking at a top 5 finisher here for at least his entire rookie contract. And the only thing that really prevents that is injury. But, I still think with injury, he belongs in this tier. Maybe not by himself. Maybe you add a couple guys just in case. But also, when we get to tier 2 here, we have a guy that is coming off of an injury that kind of held his value. So I think that's what you're also getting with Bijan Robinson.
Yeah. And I would say this too, if you're going to draft him, so if you're in dynasty drafts and you're having there, he's going to the 111, running back 1, but make sure you pair him on a win now team. Like if you draft Bijan, you need to go build a win now roster. Like you're not going to do one of those kind of punt rosters. Go get a quarterback too, because if you miss on a quarterback, if you don't take a quarterback in that second round, it gets really, if you believe in Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers later, Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, maybe, but you want to build a win now roster around Bijan, because I think for 2 or 3 years you talk about elite production for what we can expect, right? And that's kind of how we're looking there. But yeah, he's in a tier of himself. We haven't seen this either from a running back as a rookie, so it's going to be interesting to watch. But yeah, if you haven't checked it out, go check out Jeff's article on Bijan. He definitely goes into more depth than we can on the show. But let's get to tier 2. So in tier 2, we have kind of a cluster. So we talk about these guys as cluster backs, either based on age, production, those type of things. So here's our tier 2. We got Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, and then Jahmyr Gibbs rounds out there. So we have another rookie there at the top 5. Breece Hall there. And I think something to note that Christian was going to touch on. Breece Hall tore his ACL last year. and now he's still running back 2 in Dynasty. And I think that's something that with Bijan, if Bijan even got hurt, you're still going to find himself in that top 3 category. So you're not losing a ton of value with him, just based on the running back market and where it's at. And that's how I look at this tier. I guess, my biggest question to you, Jeff, is like, what do we do with McCaffrey? He's going to be 27 when the year starts this year. I know he's 26 right now. Where are we at with him? He's just so elite. We're okay with the next 2 years, that production, and we're fine with that with the Niners.
Yeah, I think so. We saw him come over, and he was really the focal point of that offense. And it's, for me, in my mind, who's the 49ers quarterback? Because I think if it's Brock Purdy at quarterback, then I think that they kind of run a little bit conservative is never the right word for a Kyle Shanahan offense, but I think it will run through Christian McCaffrey there. If it's Trey Lance, I think that that's where you get into a little bit of trouble with Christian McCaffrey's value in fantasy, because Lance is going to be rushing the ball himself. I think that when you add in Deebo Samuel being involved in the rushing game, we saw Elijah Mitchell, even after Christian McCaffrey came over, when he was healthy, still involved. And I think that you would see heavy run usage there, and you would see less passing game opportunities potentially for Christian McCaffrey because of a lot of what we've seen traditionally with those athletic quarterbacks that don't necessarily use their backs as much in the passing game. Now, McCaffrey certainly is valuable enough and skilled enough that he can be a downfield receiver in that type of a role and carry that utility, and that's what you would like to see out of that. But I do have some questions. I like his value a lot more if Brock Purdy is the quarterback for the 49ers.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is fair. And, we highlighted Jeff's article. I do want to point people in the direction of Kevin's running back tiers for Dynasty Startups article, where he touched on some of that with McCaffrey. The one guy I do want to talk about in this tier, though, is Jahmyr Gibbs. I know he has the draft capital, and I know he has the pass catching acumen. And what I don't know is what this Detroit offense looks like past this year. And the reason I say that, Ben Johnson, they have a very talented offensive coordinator. He was already getting looks at head coaching jobs. And I am fearful that when Ben Johnson gets pulled away after they are successful again this year, that this offense turns Jared Goff back into what Jared Goff kind of was in those later years for the Rams, where he was just a fine quarterback and maybe not as efficient as he was last year. I think a lot of what Ben Johnson did, he put them in positions to, for Jared Goff to succeed. If this offense isn't as prolific, Jahmyr Gibbs isn't getting necessarily the volume on the ground that I think you'd want to see. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll get a decent share of the carries. I think he's capable of that. But I think his true value lies in his pass catching skill set. I am a little bit concerned with what that looks like long term. Now, I have him up near here, but it's something to take note of here with him being in such an elite group with the 3 of Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, and Christian McCaffrey.
My big question about the Lions there is we've seen the success of Amon-Ra St. Brown working in the short and intermediate areas, and then bringing Sam Laporta in. He's not exactly going to be – he can carry the seam, but I don't think he's going to be a real field stretcher. And then Gibbs, I just feel like they're going to have a lot of guys operating in similar areas of the field. Now, you can do some of that, having backside action, that type of thing to involve them and kind of get – the play moving one direction, go the other direction. But it's the ability to stretch the field vertically, especially with Jameson Williams not in the lineup. I don't know that offense has that.
I think, I don't know. I put Gibbs down as like an anchor running back target if he can kind of get those. I think it's the pass catching. Like if you can get him and he kind of provides you with that, then yeah. But I think your point about Goff's correct. Like if he does lose that offense coordinator and he kind of goes down, yeah, I think it's going to limit him. No one talked about David Montgomery. Is he a problem at all? Do we see him as a problem? Red zone? Maybe.
Maybe. This is the thing, though. They get so creative on the goal line. I know Jamal Williams stole a lot of those touchdowns last year from DeAndre Swift, and we'll talk about DeAndre Swift a lot later, unfortunately. But I don't know that Montgomery is exactly – I don't think they'll deploy him like Jamal. I think they – will kind of let Gibbs do his thing, but also, we've kind of got to see that play out this year. That's another one of those concerns, I guess.
Yeah.
So my question on on David Montgomery relative to Gibbs is Jamal Williams was not involved at all in the passing game last year, and Montgomery has some of that skill set, and so
Yeah.
that's where. I mean, this might be the type of thing where we're talking about dynasty rankings, dynasty tiers, and maybe in a year or two, Montgomery's gone, and maybe they draft that hammer back, a guy like Braylon Allen or somebody like that, and they've got a guy that is not going to be involved in the passing game, and Gibbs takes over all of that.
Man, why were they drafting edge to be running back? No, I'm just kidding. All right, yeah, the other guy in this area, I think Jonathan Taylor is a value right now. I think he could really excel in that new offense there in Indianapolis with Anthony Richardson there. I really like Jonathan Taylor this year, and his ADP kind of shifts around. Like it really depends on drafts where you have him. I saw him go in the third round recently in a dynasty startup, so like you could get Jonathan Taylor in the third round. I think you have to smash that value there. Anything else in this tier 2, boys?
Just a question. Did you ever consider anyone else for tier 1 with Bijan?
Brees would be mine. Like if Brees comes back off that injury and is ready to go, you still could be elite 2 years, 3 years with Aaron Rodgers there for the next 2 years in that offense with Wilson. Like I think Brees is the one. If he's not injured, I think he's in tier 1 with Bijan Robinson.
I would want to see what type of usage Brees Hall would get, because early last year he would break off a big play, and that was really saving him a lot. And he had passing game involvement, but that was a little bit of fringent on committee. And so if they're bringing in a Abanikanda, having Zonovan Knight still there, having Michael Carter still there, if other guys are getting touches, then that kind of lowers the ceiling. But I mean, Bijan Robinson, we don't know that Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson and even Desmond Ridder siphoning off some rushes in that offense might be there too.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into tier 3 because this is where it gets fun. All right, so tier 3, we got Saquon Barkley at 6. Travion Henderson, Ohio State running back. If you don't know who that is, that was someone who let Jeff down all year last year. Nicholas Singleton, Penn State running back. And then Josh Jacobs at 9. So the Raiders. And this is where we start getting involved to Devy to Dynasty. And this is hard. So like one thing out there, if you're listening and watching and you're not really into like the Devy or running backs or college running backs, it is really hard to value these guys compared to NFL guys that you're on the other side. And then what I talked about pre-show with these guys, something that I look at is like if these guys get drafted, if Travion Henderson got round 1 capital or early round 2, they'd be a top 10 asset in Dynasty, especially with the running back market. So you're banking on these guys getting drafted with that draft capital, and you're weighing that. That's how I look at it from that personal view. So, I think one thing that is I don't know, Travion Henderson, let's talk about him. Last year didn't really perform very well. His freshman year, though, he's one of the best backs in the country. Last year, he got injured. He had a lower ankle injury, just didn't have that same explosiveness. And then this year, there's some question marks about him. Do you think he should be in this tier 3, Jeff? What do you think? You're an Ohio State guy.
Relative to the value, because I think you see things drop off pretty quickly. You see older running backs pretty quickly coming up here. You see backs that are in committees coming up pretty quickly here. And Travion Henderson skill set, he's at 210-ish pound back. There's a lot of he's not quite Jahmyr Gibbs in the passing game, but he can be involved in the passing game, and he also has that home run ability as well. And so it's a lot of what you like to see. Who would you guys comp him to right now in the NFL to give a kind of color the listeners out there?
Jonathan Taylor is probably the closest, but I think he's got a little less juice than Jonathan Taylor maybe, but I do think that he has a better pass catching skill set. So, and then in terms of like, why would we bet on Devy guys ahead of NFL guys? I do want to touch on that quickly. I think so we just talked about traits and, having that ability to, catch passes and be a big play guy. That's what I look for when I'm trying to like combine these two sets of rankings is, am I going to bet on this guy to continue being productive? Because Travion Henderson, like Kevin said, was one of the most productive backs, as well as being one of the best backs in the country, but he was also one of the most productive backs at Ohio State 2 years ago. That's someone that I would like to continue betting on. Nicholas Singleton in this tier as well. He was productive as a freshman, but that's another traits-based bet where we talk about Henderson having juice. Singleton probably has more juice. And I think these two are actually vying for being the best running back in the Big Ten this year, which is a super exciting discussion. And, they're a year apart. Singleton's a 2025 guy. But I do find it interesting that we put them with Saquon Barkley, the guy that got drafted in the top 3 and was regarded as a borderline generational running back prospect.
Yeah, Singleton, that 227-pound, that's what he listed at. A little bit of that bigger back, that 3-down back. And as you look at Barkley and Josh Jacobs, those are 2 also 3-down backs that are kind of have some runway still in their prime and have so that's kind of what that tier is comprised of.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the old guys then. Saquon and Josh Jacobs just sitting there. Saquon have pretty high. I mean, doesn't have a contract, hasn't been in there in terms of like where he's gone in terms of like he's opted out of OTAs and those type of things. Jacobs another hard one for me. 1-year deal with the Raiders. What is he going to be moving forward? Like, is there a realistic scenario where we see Saquon and Josh drop out of like the 12th? Like next year, could we see them drop out of the top 12? And that's how fast it goes. And so, we're ranking them now, but realistically, both those guys could fall out of the top 12.
Yeah, and you see an injury, anything like that. If there's any levels of, if Eric Gray gets involved with the Giants, or if Saquon Barkley sits out because of the contract dispute, or if Zamir White grabs a portion of the role with the Raiders or there's going to be uncertainty around both Barkley and Jacobs moving forward because neither have contracts for next year. Both are playing on the franchise tag right now, and what they land in free agency, where they fall out, what that market looks like in free agency.
Yeah.
Are you drafting either one of those guys in a dynasty league this year?
Goodness, no, not in a startup. I draft wide receivers.
Christian will.
I do.
Christian will.
Yeah. Here's my thing though. I think they've become decently valued. I think, in my experience with some dynasty startups this offseason, I think people are largely fading the running back position, and with good reason. I think there are a lot of question marks like we just talked about, but I also think there comes a point where, okay, that's where I'm comfortable. And I think Barkley really doesn't get into that tier for me. I'm not super comfortable with that, but Jacobs kind of gets into that tier where I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, I can anchor, assuming that he plays, that's the risk you're taking. But I can anchor my running back room with a guy like Josh Jacobs and build young at the other positions as well.
I think you make a great point there, and what you're seeing in startups right now, these and for rightfully so, the young wide receivers are getting shoved up the board. Running backs are getting a fade right now, but I've talked to you guys offline a little bit about how you see so many wide receivers going early in startup drafts, but I think you're going to have a lot of people that are, especially if you play a lot of dynasty in a lot of different leagues, you get a lot of people that have more of that redraft mindset. And I think that maybe you might see a Devonta Smith goes off the board before Saquon Barkley. But if you're somebody that wants to pivot and you're looking at that owner and they're saying, okay, well, I mean, Devonta Smith's like wide receiver 15 and Saquon Barkley's like RB5. And if I can get that elite guy in my roster, I'd be a little bit more willing in the trade market to give up those younger pieces. And that's kind of what I've seen playing in these leagues. Some of these trades that have happened after startups, it does kind of seem like people will draft to 0 RB builds in the draft, and then they get out of the draft and they say, well, wait, I don't have a running back, and now I'm willing to trade my wide receiver I drafted before the running back so that I have a running back.
I'm telling you, bully running back is the strategy now. I wouldn't say that, but there is something to it. Wait till I'm going to drop something this summer. All right, let's go to tier 4. So there's our tier 3. Tier 4. This is a smaller tier, but we have Quinshon Judkins. He's an Ole Miss running back. Kind of came out of nowhere last year. Famously is better than Zach Evans, what we were told. And he did. He had a great year, rushed for over, I think it was 1,300 yards in the SEC. Then we have Travis Etienne at 11, which could be a shock for some. And then Kenneth Walker at 12. And the reason why Kenneth Walker is there is solely based on probably my ranking. But when you're looking at 10, 11, 12, what stands out to you, Jeff?
I would say the uncertainty around the young backs. I think that we've saw a lot of production around these two guys last year, Ken Walker and Travis Etienne, coming on the scene, both their rookie seasons. Etienne didn't play his rookie year, and so by the NBA rule, he was still a rookie. So seeing that immediate production probably values them there, but then adding the competition that came in through the draft and potentially putting them in committee roles. I mean, if these are legitimate committee backfields, I think that you might see the value drop pretty quickly out of the bottom of both of these guys. But again, you're kind of stepping into that territory where the people behind them are definitely getting older, and you're probably not going to move down for the older guys. But it's just really the uncertainty around this tier, and it's a lot of it is just because of, I think, age and where they are in their careers is a big factor on having these guys in this location. But again, if somebody is convinced full stop of what Ken Walker's role is going to look like, or even what Travis Etienne's role is going to look like, I'd be a little bit cautious about that.
Yeah, I have my takes on both of these backs. I think I've put my takes about Tank Bigsby out there, and then we talked about it on the show quite a bit. But I do think that Tank Bigsby is going to eat into a decent chunk of Travis Etienne's role. I think there are things that he does better than Travis Etienne, and I think that there's in a realistic scenario, Doug Peterson's always wanted to use a committee backfield. And so I do think it's going to be more of a 60-40 split than maybe a 70-30 like a lot of people are projecting with Etienne. And if it is that 60-40, then I do think Etienne's value drops a little bit. I do want to touch on Quinshon Judkins quickly. So 5'11", 220, 1,567 yards last year. Incredible at creating yards on his own, incredible contact balance, a lot of good burst, a lot of fantastic vision. He did a lot of things right to stay on the field over Zach Evans, because when Zach Evans was on the field, as you guys know, we are all Zach Evans fans, or we were definitely pre-draft, but Zach Evans is pretty talented, and Quinshon kind of kept him on the bench. So I think what this is less a bet on traits, because I do think that he's got some traits, but I also don't think that he's got that elite breakaway speed. It's a bet on the mental traits and the nuance of playing the running back position. Quinshon Judkins emits that. And so I do think we're looking at a guy that could get drafted in the top 50 pretty easily in 2 years. But once again, Devy running backs are tough. This could be a miss because he doesn't have that elite trait that you're betting on.
Yeah. Can I go on a rant real quick on Etienne? So, I saw someone the other day talk about how good Etienne was as a pass catcher in college, and he screenshotted his receptions box score from ESPN. That's just not a good way to kind of throw the narrative about Etienne. Etienne was a very poor pass catcher in college football. He went back his senior year to improve it, and I don't think he did. He caught more balls. I don't think he improved as a pass catcher. There was times where he had a lot of drops. He had a lot of, bobbles. And really what it was, Clemson offense was awful. We know that. They have not had a good offense as well. But the numbers that you see in terms of the receptions, yeah, he had 48 receptions his senior year, but those receptions were kind of, they weren't what we saw from Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby is probably a better pass catcher in terms of what he did in this college production. Not so much the receptions, but just as a pass catcher. I saw someone mention that recently, and they keep saying that. And I'm I feel like I'm living in a bizarro world, because when we were doing this 3 years ago, do you guys remember everybody was talking about how bad of a pass catcher Etienne was? Mm-hmm. And they coming out in the pre-draft process and oh no, he can't catch passes. And now they're using that same argument. Oh no, he can catch passes. He's better than Tank. And then also, I did see someone oh, he's a top 3 back last year. No, he wasn't. Etienne struggled down the stretch. From weeks 10 to 17, Etienne was running back 33. He averaged 10.2 fantasy points per game. He had a few big weeks towards the end, but he wasn't that guy that you're oh, he had a couple big games. And that really kind of shot up his averages there. But after that, he was pretty, average for the most part. And I think Tank being there, that's a big deal. Whereas I think Kenneth's a little bit better than Charbonnet, but I do think Tank has that ability. So that's why I'm a little higher on Kenneth than I am Etienne.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was earlier in the season. Well, very early in the season, we saw James Robinson put Etienne on the bench, and that did happen with this coaching staff. Then I think there was a little bit of a stretch there where Trevor Lawrence, having the pedigree that he had, I think that defenses were a little bit more focused on stopping the passing game, and that allowed Etienne to kind of have his space a little bit, because I know there was a stretch where he's averaging over 6 yards per carry. And then I think what happened is defenses said, now wait a minute, we're not going to let Travis Etienne be the guy that beats us, and we're going to put that on Lawrence if he's going to really go out there and do it. And because his development was kind of delayed, kind of behind, not where exactly where you wanted to see it, and he did get there towards the end of the year. But again, I think you're dead right on Doug Peterson going out there, loving a committee, adding Tank Bigsby. And the other thing to remember too is that for years we wanted more out of Miles Sanders when he was with Doug Peterson, and you looked at the other backs in that backfield, Boston Scott, other guys like that continued to get work, and it just drove you nuts that Miles Sanders didn't get more. I think that Travis Etienne is the new Miles Sanders.
Corey Clement.
We're going to be clipping that bad boy for social media. All right, we're at tier 5. So let's jump over to tier 5 real quick. Another three players in this tier. We have number 13 is Austin Eckler, who just got a incentive raise, not a contract, but an incentive raise there. Nick Chubb at 14. I feel like Nick Chubb has been at 14 his entire career on these lists. And at Najee Harris at 15. So, 3 guys that can produce this year. I think overall, though, their dynasty outlook can be a little bit, I guess, murky in terms of that. There's really nothing behind these 3 guys in terms of relevant backs. I mean, I guess if you're a Jaylen Warren fan, there's a weird contingent of Jaylen Warren fans. You guys know that? Like, there's a very strong hive out there. There is a Jaylen Warren hive out there. And Jerome Ford behind Chubb, Eckler, in terms of what is Spiller going to be that guy? Like, these 3 guys are pretty lockstep for, hey, going to produce. I think the question is like, overall, what is their dynasty value? But I think both these guys, like 2 years, right? I think both these assets, I think Chubb can still be that guy. Chubb's getting a little bit older. But Eckler, pass catching, never has a ton of usage there. Najee Harris could step up and be better. The offensive line's a little bit better. What's your biggest takeaway from this tier, Jeff?
I think the narrative around Jaylen Warren that you mentioned is kind of funny because Najee Harris was hurt last year. He played last year, most of the year with an injury, and he wasn't himself from his rookie year, and anybody could see that on tape. And so I think that you have a situation where people saw that, didn't have that burst because of that injury, and then they would see Jaylen Warren come in with fresh legs and have a little bit more pep in his step, and then now you've got people out there saying that Jaylen Warren is better running back than Najee Harris, which is good luck with that. That's not correct. And Najee Harris is he's very polished when it comes to receiving. We saw how much volume he got in the receiving game as a rookie. We've seen the Steelers take real strides on their offensive line, adding Broderick Jones in the first round, they added another. Gosh, I'm blanking on what the other guard they added in free agency, but I know that they gave real investment into that offensive line, and that was a big problem last year. I mean, you might say the concern is Kenny Pickett there, but that is what that is. Austin Eckler, old reliable. I mean, locking in your top 5 fantasy finish out of the running back position. And we saw news yesterday that Mike Williams has that back injury potentially that could cost him some time. And when Williams or Keenan Allen were out of the lineup, Eckler's passing volume increased dramatically. And so that kind of steps in there. And if he's going to play the whole year with the rookie Quentin Johnston at wide receiver, that's going to be great for Eckler. And then Nick Chubb, I think maybe is the most interesting one because we've seen Nick Chubb kind of locked in that committee. And I've talked to you guys about it a little bit. And I think we might have a situation where if the Browns are throwing the ball a lot more and maybe even going towards more no huddle, and I wonder if Chubb might be that back that's on the field all the time and less involvement of a guy like Kareem Hunt or Jerome Ford, whatever it might be, less of that committee approach. And if they really lock Chubb into being a 3-down back, that's a guy that we haven't exactly seen his real upside relative to his talent, I believe, in terms of fantasy production, in terms of overall statistical production, because I think he's a talented enough back that if he's getting all that, he can be a 2,000-yard rusher.
Yeah, for sure. You remember the Geno Smith point that you made last week, Kevin, about how people watched like the first 8 weeks of the season and then they weren't subscribed to Football Guys, so they were 0-8, and so they stopped watching football. That happened with, I think, multiple guys in this list. I think Nick Chubb and Najee Harris kind of suffer from that. I think Najee Harris had a really rough start to last season. I also think that down the stretch he was fantastic. He was a top 10 back from weeks 8 through the end of the season. He averaged 15 fantasy points per game. He ran for almost as many yards as Nick Chubb in that time frame. And, I think Jeff's right in saying that Nick Chubb could be a 2,000-yard rusher. And so when you factor in that plus all of the upgrades that they made and just the natural progression of 47-year-old Kenny Pickett leading that offense, I think you're looking at a player that's probably undervalued on this list. I think you can make a case for him ahead of the two guys with question marks in tier 4 and Etienne and Walker. But I also understand let's wait and see, because that offense still doesn't really excite me a whole lot. The one thing that does excite me is the upgrades on the offensive line. So, and then the Eckler point, Eckler's going to get passing work and they didn't add anyone. I do think it's worth watching Ezekiel Elliott. I think that is a natural fit over with Kellen Moore to be the RB2 there. And I wonder what that does to Eckler's upside. But overall, I think you're looking at a guy that's going to be relevant for the next 2 to 3 years. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, and to your point about Najee, he was really, really good on the stretch. Those last 4 games, he averaged just like 17 points per game, and they did improve. And the guard that Jeff was looking for was Isaac Samulo from the Eagles, and you're looking at those guys, you're going to see that improvement there. These are if you're a contender, these 3 guys are good guys to go try to grab, especially if the team that has them is just bad, because they're gonna want these guys off the roster because they think that the running back, everybody hates running backs, the value's there. You could go grab those guys, and I would highly recommend doing so. All right, let's go to tier 6. So we got a kind of a big group here, so we're gonna get into them. Raheem Sanders, Arkansas running back, at 16, Ramondre Stevenson at 17, Javonte Williams at 18, J.K. Dobbins at 19, and then Tony Pollard at 20. We have a lot of disagreements on these ones, but why don't we just go to Ramondre Stevenson first, and then we'll just kind of work our way around. Ramondre's at 17 in our consensus rankings here. Is that too high, too low for you, Jeff? What do you think with Ramondre?
Ramondre's tough because I think the way he's valued in around Dynasty, if you're around people that are playing Dynasty, I think he is really viewed as a 3-down back. And we've seen a little bit of that in his past. And I think that shoves him up. Whereas I think that they're going to have a true passing down back, and it sounds early camp, very, very, very early OTA stuff. Sounds like it might be Ty Montgomery, and we know that Ty Montgomery has that skill set. It sounds like he is back healthy. It sounds like the Patriots are really enjoying and liking what he's able to do. And so if you lock Ramondre Stevenson into that, we saw with Damian Harris, that Sony Michel type role, whereas Montgomery is getting a lot of the passing down work, that diminishes that value pretty quickly, because I don't know that any of us expect the Patriots offense to be great this year. And so, a early down back who is dependent on goal line touches and gets a little bit of pass work, I mean, I don't know where the value is on that one, to be honest with you. And but again, it's like almost like where we would view him relative to where you have to play him in your league. And I think that if you're in a league that somebody out there, this is one of those that if you're in a league with people that are on Twitter, look for that person that's tweeting about Ramondre Stevenson and convince he's all in, and maybe find yourself a nice little deal there.
Ramondre, yeah, he's an interesting one, because the fantasy community as a whole and fantasy analysts traditionally scoff at the idea of a day 3 back sticking. And we have 1 year of true elite upside of Ramondre Stevenson. And it's funny to me that they were able to add James Robinson to this offense as well, because that's one of those guys that he had an elite fantasy year. He had an elite production year, and then he kind of fell off. And so I do wonder what the sticking power of Ramondre is. 69 receptions last year, though, I don't think that sticks. And that's where I get a little concerned, because while he was an efficient runner and he was good in that offense, I don't think that he's going to get that type of usage. I think there were a lot of things that factored into that. And then, like Jeff said, early OTA stuff indicates that that's not going to be the case. And I actually, even if it's not Ty Montgomery, it could be Kevin Sky Pierre Strong. There are a variety of options that they could go to, but I just wonder about the usage there.
Yeah, I mean, you both hit my kind of worry with him. If there's some way I can tier up to go get one of these other guys that we've already talked about, I definitely want to. If I can go get that based on the value. Stevenson's definitely a value play in your leagues though, because there's some people that really value him high, and there's some that don't. So like, you really got to try to kind of extract that a little bit. I'll let you pick, Christian. Who else you want to talk about in this tier? What catches your eye?
You know, it's a toss up for me between Javonte and J.K. Dobbins because I think we can talk about them together, right? So J.K. Dobbins is just a year ahead of where Javonte is, right? J.K. Dobbins had a bad knee injury that took a while to recover from. He comes back, he's hobbling on the field and still producing for fantasy. But we have an offensive coordinator change. We have a completely different offense that we're looking at in Baltimore. Dobbins, to me, is actually going to benefit from that because I don't think we saw the elite usage that we were hoping for when J.K. Dobbins went to the Ravens because of that injury and because it took so long for him to kind of get he was behind Mark Ingram that first year. You know, there were a lot of things that factored into that. But I also think that this Ravens offense is going to pass the ball a lot, and J.K. Dobbins is a fantastic receiving back that we really just haven't seen that because of the Greg Roman ancient offense. Dobbins to me is the guy that I'm looking at on this list that I think has the most fluctuation in his value this year. I think he could be a top 6 to 7 back this year just based on, pass catching and touchdown upside. This offense is going to be good. I guess I can't guarantee that with the uncertainty at wide receiver, but in theory, this offense is going to be a lot better with Lamar there for a full year as well. So that's the guy that I think bumps in value. And then on the Javonte side of things, I think this is simply skepticism that he's going to be recovered from that knee injury and, what that looks like following his recovery. I've heard good things over the last couple of weeks. Sean Payton has indicated that he should be ready by week 1, which is insane. I don't think that's going to be the case, but to me, I think these players have a similar track and Javonte is just maybe a year behind it where he's properly valued now, where JK probably wasn't following his injury.
Yeah, Javonte's upside is very, very high in PPR formats. We've seen him be a natural pass catcher in the past. And so Sean Payton, obviously it was Alvin Kamara, but he had 28% target share to a running back position when over his last 3 years in New Orleans. And that led the league by a decent margin. And then last year, Russell Wilson was top 5 in running back targets too in Denver. And so that could be a position where if he is healthy, recovered, that 3 down back, I mean, he immediately probably jumps you could jump him up here to maybe tier 3 even. And I don't think that's even unrealistic to say. And so I know Kevin's big on the time to buy him is not quite yet. But as you get more positive reports about that recovery, it might be quicker than you are. And I know that people are smashing Samaje Perine right now, but God bless you and good luck, because if Javonte Williams is healthy and on the field, Samaje Perine's not going to be much of anything.
Yeah, but they were also saying this about J.K. Dobbins last year, too, around this time. Oh, his recovery's going well. It's going great. And then he started on the PUP list, didn't he? So, that's why I'm very hesitant, because I think Javonte could slip down to, tier 7, tier 8, and by the season started, and that's when you really could kind of get that value. I agree with you guys though on that. I think Dobbins could be one of those guys that we're talking about in tier 4. Hey, he just is one of those guys that's going to produce that offense, score touchdowns, and you're excited for it. Tony Pollard is the one. Jeff has him. Where do you have him in your rankings, Jeff?
I think I've got him at running back 10
and
13, maybe 13.
So Jeff's a little bit more bullish on Tony Pollard than we are. I think the question just remains with Tony is he signed the tag. What does that look like? Where are they going to get? I think Ezekiel Elliott last year had, I think it was 17 rushes within the 5-yard line. So that's gone. So many people expect, hey, Tony Pollard's going to actually get those touchdowns that kind of got, taken from him by Zeke in that offense. But, I just want to see Ronald Jones just vulture some touchdowns from my guy Tony Pollard to piss off all the fantasy managers out there. But I don't know. I have Tony a little bit lower than that. You just expect him to get used that way, Jeff. Is that what it is? You just expect him to kind of get used. They're not going to bring anybody in. I still think they could maybe bring Zeke back. I think that's a realistic possibility, or another running back. But you just expect that usage to be there, and you're all in this year.
Yeah, I think a guy that stands out in my mind is Aaron Jones. Potential usage like Aaron Jones and heavy involvement in the passing game. I think that I don't know. It's funny to me with all the talk about wanting to run the ball more, because why would you go trade for Brandon Cooks and not have Tony Pollard as your primary running back, and then really the only running back you added is Deuce Vaughn? That doesn't set up to me like a running offense at all. And I think you're going to be in 11 personnel almost most every play, having CeeDee Lamb, having Gallup, having Brandon Cooks on that roster. And so I think if you're spread them out, fast paced, throwing the ball, I mean, you love Pollard in that situation. It's just one that the personnel that is being added doesn't match what the coach is talking about. And, maybe they bring back Ezekiel Elliott, and maybe that makes a little bit more. Maybe Malik Davis is a little bit more involved than anybody is really thinking right now. And that's a great stash out there if you're able to grab Malik Davis for free in your leagues. But again, it's the personnel. When I look at what the personnel is set up to do versus what I see what the coaches were talking about doing, it doesn't match up. But the personnel does match Tony Pollard's skill set very well.
My concern with Tony Pollard is he's on the tag, and we don't know what this Dallas offense is. So if he goes out and has a bad year, maybe they learn their lesson about paying running backs big contracts, and maybe Tony Pollard's on a different team next year, or following this upcoming year. And on the other side of things, maybe they do sign him, but maybe they bring in competition, or maybe the running back position truly isn't that valuable now that Kellen Moore is gone and they've got a new offensive coordinator in there. So I think those are some of my concerns. On the other side of things, I'm doing projections right now. I think this year will be a good year for him, and the value will creep up to the point that it's time to sell and get out of it. He's 26 years old already too. And this is going to be his first time maybe leading a backfield. And I say maybe because we're not 100% certain that that's exactly what's going to happen. So those, I think he's a good player. I worry about the situation a bit.
So my thought on him, really breaking him down, is you see Bijan Robinson going in the top 10 in the draft because he's able to be used in the passing game. You see Jahmyr Gibbs going 12th in the draft because of that utility in the passing game. And I think that some teams out there are starting to get comfortable with the idea of almost an offensive weapon relative to a traditional running back. And that's where Pollard's skill set, I think, plays very well. And I think that if you see immediate success for Jahmyr Gibbs, and if Christian McCaffrey continues for production for the 49ers, and if DeAndre Swift comes in right away quickly and for the Eagles, and if Bijan Robinson makes the impact that he should, are you going to, in the copycat league, are you going to have a team desperate out there for that offensive weapon back that can be involved heavily in the passing game? And as he hits the market, is that going to be the path to get him into maybe even a better position? It's hard to say there could be a better position than I think his current structure relative to the depth and talent around him.
Yeah, that's fair. As a Cowboys fan, I try to stay neutral in this conversation just because it is what it is. I think the biggest thing is with McCarthy calling plays now, I'm going to tell you right now, no one knows what the hell's going on because McCarthy doesn't tell anybody what he's doing. Schottenheimer, we talked about this a little bit, me and Christian did when we did a video on CD. He's big on play action fakes, pushing the ball down the field, and I think that's why they went and got Brandon Cooks. And what does that do with Pollard then? Because they're going to use him in the play action game. And you know what? That offense is going to struggle as long as they can't pass block. They were ranked 28th last year in pass blocking. And when Dak, he had turnover worthy plays, went from 3.6 to 4.5% when he got under pressure. So I know they're going to want to limit those pressure plays. And so they might use Pollard a little bit, but hey, we haven't seen Pollard have over 200 carries yet. We haven't seen him get that usage that we haven't seen either. So I think there's some question marks there. I think you're a little bullish on him, Jeff, but we'll see. We'll see who's right. It's usually you. All right, let's go to tier 7. DeAndre Swift is in this tier. My king. I'm just kidding. Cam Akers, 22. Aaron Jones at 23 and Joe Mixon at 24. I'm going to tell you right now, the biggest value in fantasy football right now is Joe Mixon for the Bengals. I mean, I know that he wasn't great. Jeff's going to give you this, hey, he wasn't great last year. He's the starting running back on the Bengals, And he's gonna, if he just has a little bit better usage, I think he's gonna score touchdowns for me. And I think he's getting valued now. We have him at 24, but he is actually going, like, I think his ADP is like around 32 or 33 running back in terms of that. Like, he's getting valued even lower than this. So we're definitely higher on consensus there. Obviously, he missed some games last year, but I think Joe Mixon's a value. I think that in that offense, that's kind of the offense that you want to kind of be in. I think when you look at these offenses around here, I think I like Cam Akers, but again, that offense, what is that offense? Matthew Stafford is going to be healthy. Aaron Jones, Jordan Love, what is that? There's question marks there. I think DeAndre Swift has upside, and we like the ceiling there. But again, Hurts is going to definitely take some of that away. Whereas Mixon, we know what he can do if he's just going to get carries in the red zone and score touchdowns. There was a lot of instances last year where he got red zone touches. He just wasn't able to put it in either. Like, there was times when you watch them, like, he just didn't score. So I think Mixon's still a value to me. What do you think, Jeff? Am I crazy?
Well, I feel like maybe I'm the crazy one because I'm the one that's trying to bury Mixon because I've got him at RB 36 in my rankings, and
yeah, that's crazy.
It's just, well, he is still a Bengal, and I think that it's important. We're kind of I feel like everybody's waiting for June 1st and thinks that 18 players are going to be released, but teams can designate pre-June 1st, and in reality of like both him and Dalvin Cook in Minnesota, I think that if you've been paying attention, there's been some cap maneuvering that's already taken place with these teams to kind of accommodate their salaries, and so I think that if they were going to be released, they would do a post June 1st designation, and they wouldn't be waiting until that magic date on the calendar. I think that you can feel comfortable. Joe Mixon is going to be the starting running back for the Bengals. It's interesting. I think that you see a lot in the Devies, and not the Devy space, but the Dynasty space. Everybody's convinced that Chase Brown's going to be that backup running back. And I think it's going to be Travion Williams because that's kind of what the team is saying right now. And so it does seem like they don't have any trust in Chris Evans, and it does seem like I think they would be very hesitant to give a later fifth round player that level of responsibility and that 3-down skill set that we've traditionally seen that backfield use. Whereas I think Williams is the stash play right now. If you're out there and you're your waivers are open, you're able to do that type of move. But I get it. I mean, Mixon tried twice last year, and he did very, very well in the 2 times that he tried.
Okay, hold on. So just to put in some numbers for this context, okay? In his 8 healthy games from weeks 9 to the conference championship, he averaged 16.7 fantasy points per game. So he was still putting up points in those weeks. Okay, that's fine. You can take out the Panthers game if you want, but when you look at the points. Yeah, but he also had the highest usage in his career, high receiving. He had 60 catches for 441 yards and 70 targets. We haven't seen that. And they got rid of Samaje Perine too. So if they got rid of those guys, and we're going to see that, like, he still could get usage in the passing game. They use them in that way. I think you just have an unhated bias towards Joe Mixon for no reason.
It's because Bengals Bills. This is a thing now. No, I get it.
Understand how playoff tickets are sold. I'm just saying.
That's fair. So here's the thing. I think Joe Mixon he was bad last year. There were a lot of times where he was actually bad, but it didn't matter. And sometimes it doesn't matter for fantasy football, because if the coach says, hey, you're going to be my guy and I'm going to give you a ton of touches, that's what we're chasing. And I think when you look at the construct of the Bengals roster, I think Jeff's right. I think Travion Williams is the clear RB2 for that team. But in doing projections, I just don't see a world in which Travion Williams eats into Joe Mixon's workload a whole lot. I think Joe Mixon could probably have one of the highest running back rushing market shares in the league, just simply because there's not a whole lot of talent behind him. Chase Brown is not relevant to this conversation, by the way. I don't know that he's the RB3. I think Chris Evans still might have that. But for what it's worth, I think Mixon's going to have at least a good this year, and that keeps him in this tier. I think this is a good transition to Aaron Jones, because Joe Mixon has that continuity. He has that consistency from last year, where Aaron Jones definitely has a different quarterback, and that might, make the offense a little bit different, right? Running back targets are traditionally a quarterback stat. I think Jordan Love is one of the perfect quarterbacks for Aaron Jones, and I think what we're looking at is people panicking about Aaron Jones being 28 and not doing the same thing with Austin Eckler. And I think Aaron Jones has the potential to have that Austin Eckler-like usage over the next couple of years, with Jordan Love consistently going to his check down, and at least this year. But I don't know. I guess maybe I'm the crazy one on Aaron Jones. Like Jeff might be the crazy one on Joe Mixon, because I have Aaron Jones all the way up at RB20, and that is by far the highest of the three of us.
I don't really hate Aaron Jones. I don't have any issue with Aaron Jones where he's at. Like, and I think that he could, have a really good year. Anything on Akers? I just usage to me, like that's where I'm looking at with Akers. That's why I feel like he's got to be in that 20 to 18 area.
Yeah, usage, another year healthy, another year off that Achilles, and so still only age 24 season. So I think that the Rams are probably going to be a terrible football team, but if he's going to be out there getting all the touches, I mean, that's certainly going to help.
Is he any good?
Does it matter?
It doesn't matter. I just made that case, but I'm just wondering. Because here's the thing, he's approaching his contract year. That's why it matters for him more than it would for Mixon, who already has that contract. Because then we're looking at, Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, but if he's approaching that contract year, I mean, he might. I mean, realistically, if he performs the way he did down the stretch those last 3 games, we're talking about like a running back 15 overall in PPR. More than likely.
Here might be the better question is he a Ram like in November and December? Because if that team is very, very bad and he's approaching that contract year, we've already seen them trade off Jalen Ramsey, and we know that Les Snead he will do trades, and that could be a situation where maybe a back goes down in Kansas City or a back goes down in Miami, whatever it might be, and maybe Cam Akers gets traded into potentially a better situation.
One thing Les Snead and Jeff Bell have in common: doing trades.
Cam Akers realistically could be a Bengal at some point this year. We'll be laughing about that, like going forward.
Relationship,
right. Yeah. I mean, it could be. All right, let's go to tier 8, and then we'll probably tier 8, and then we'll see where we're at. We just got 2 guys in this tier. 25, we have Zach Charbonnet, and then Miles Sanders at 26. Jeff, make your best case for Zach Charbonnet. Why should it be higher? Why do we have that wrong?
Best case for Zach Charbonnet is the leverage. He could be getting the high leverage opportunities, especially PPR formats. He could be getting the goal line work. He could be getting the passing down work. And, we've seen the Thunder and Lightning out of Pete Carroll before, going way back. If you're an old head like me, Lendale White and Reggie Bush, and maybe Charbonnet and Ken Walker is a little bit of that. And maybe Charbonnet is eating a lot of the volume and a lot of those touches that you really want, whereas Walker might be used more as that potential home run ability threat.
Yeah, my case for Charbonnet is that I have no idea how this usage is going to be in Seattle, and so there's a chance that he's a top 12 guy, and Ken Walker is inefficient but used as a space creator or a guy out in space, and that's kind of his role. I just don't think that's how they view it. I think this is just not a backfield that I'm interested. I'm lower on Kenneth Walker than where we have him ranked as well, so I'm fading both of them because I think they eat into each other too much. They're probably both fine picks and fine plays, and obviously with injury, one of them could step up and be that guy. But I don't think the Seahawks want to have that guy, and that's why I think both of these guys are just not as interesting to me in Dynasty as they were before the draft this year.
All right, we'll be back next week. We're doing wide receivers next week. So that'll be fun, I think, right? We're doing wide receivers next week?
Wide receivers next week.
All right, cool. Now we are. See how I just guided the show? That's what I do. All right, we'll be back next week, June 1st. We'll be on at 1 p.m. Eastern. Until then, I'm Kevin Coleman.
I'm Jeff Bell.
And I'm Christian Williams, and you just watched the Football Guys College Football Show.